couple more interesting developments on the emergence of a cashless society to report on this week, with news that Mastercard has just joined the ID2020 Alliance. Now, what is the ID2020 Alliance? The ID2020 Alliance was founded in May 2016 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. It's an alliance of governments, non-profits, academic institutions, and a growing list of at least 150 private companies, including Microsoft, Accenture, the Rockefeller Foundation, and now Mastercard. The aim of this alliance is to, quote, provide a unique digital identity to everyone on the planet. The alliance says it's necessary to give everyone a unique digital identification because there are over 1 billion refugees, women and children without any form of identification and who are therefore invisible and locked out of society. Their website says, every day we rely on a variety of forms of identification to go about our lives. Our driver's license, passport, work badge and building access cards, debit and credit cards, transit passes and more. But technology is evolving at a blinding pace, and many of the transactions that require identification are today being conducted digitally. From e-passports to digital wallets, online banking to social media accounts, these new forms of digital ID allow us to travel, conduct business, access financial and health records, stay connected and much more. The Alliance says that as the world moves towards this digital ID landscape where everyone accesses things electronically, a global ID standard is needed for everyone on the planet so that everyone can participate in this new world. They say it will also solve the problem of ID not being recognized in different places. So imagine a person in the Middle East trying to use their driving license as a form of ID in the United Kingdom. UK businesses might not recognise or accept that ID. So this is why they want to create a global digital ID standard recognised around the whole planet. The Alliance says that by 2030 it aims to have facilitated the scaling of a safe, verifiable, persistent digital identity system consistent with Sustainable Development Goals agreed upon by the United Nations. Working with governments around the world, it wants to make a coordinated, concerted push towards the goal of universal digital identity. So the idea is that everyone would be given a digital ID at birth and they would keep that same ID until death. And having this digital ID would become a global universal standard around the world that you would require to access a driving license, passport, access transit systems, do business transactions, and so forth. Windows Central notes that the aim here is to create the foundation to unify the world's citizens' participation in global community and a universal digital economy. Now remember what the Bible said about the end times. The world will move to a cashless society, and as part of a global system of governance, the Antichrist will require everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on their right hand or on the forehead, and no one could buy or sell anything without the mark. Windows Central asks the question, if the Alliance's goal is a globally recognized digital identity for everyone from birth to death, will that become a global mandate? How will it be enforced and by whom? What happens to those individuals unwilling to participate? Will they be persecuted? And how will the implementation of identification evolve with technology beyond smartphones? Will wearables, implants, like those being used in Swedish subways, or some form of digital tattoo become the norm? As more and more transactions become digital in nature and are built around a single global identification standard supported by Microsoft, the question of who will govern this evolving global community and economy becomes relevant, especially since non-participants in this system would be unable to buy goods and services. So we can see how a potential convergence is happening here. There's a desire to give everyone in the world a digital ID by 2030 so they can buy and sell using a new global standard. That ID could very well be given in the form of a chip or a smart tattoo. So anytime you need to access a train, an office building, you need to buy something, you can simply scan it to verify your ID. Windows Central is right to ask the question though, what therefore if you refuse to get a digital ID? What if you refuse to participate in this system? If it becomes a global standard, will it mean not being able to get a passport or a driving license or a mortgage without one if you can't prove your credentials under this system? This begins to look very similar to the Bible's prophecy about taking a mark and not being able to buy or sell without it. So again, it's interesting that Mastercard has just joined last week especially, and since the aim is to have the system in place by 2030, that's only 10 years away. So it's something to keep an eye on in the coming years. So that's the first development. And then the second thing I want to briefly mention relates to what Elon Musk is up to at the moment. This is a bit more speculative perhaps, but Elon Musk has recently been talking about his plans to have microchips planted directly into the brain to help cure diseases and overcome disabilities. He calls the project Neuralink and says it could in principle fix anything that's wrong with the brain. Indeed, the chip could potentially be used to restore eyesight, hearing and limb movement, in addition to addressing diseases that affect the brain. The device would be implanted directly into the skull to enable electrode threads to interface with certain areas of the brain. Here's a clip of Musk describing it.
Basically implanted in your skull, so but it would be flush with your skull. So you basically take out a chunk of skull, put the Neuralink device in there. You'd put the electrode, you'd insert the electrode threads very carefully into the brain, and then you stitch it up, and you wouldn't even know that somebody has it, and so then it can interface basically anywhere in your brain. So it could be something that helps cure, say, eyesight, like returns your eyesight, even if you've lost your optic nerve type of thing.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Hearing, obviously. Pretty much anything that it could, in principle, fix almost anything that is wrong with the brain, and it could restore limb functionality. So if you've got interface into the motor cortex, and then an implant that's that's like a microcontroller in your muscle groups, you could then create a sort of a neural shunt that restores somebody who's a quadriplegic to full functionality.
So the hole would be small. How big would the hole be that you have to drill and then replace with this piece? It's only one hole?
Well, yeah, the device we're working on right now is about an inch in diameter.
So you basically take an auger and you drill through the surface of the ice, and you create a small hole, and you can dunk your line in there. So this is like that. You're ice fishing on the top of your skull, and then you cork it.
Yeah, and you replace that, say, 1 inch diameter piece of skull with this Neuralink device, and that has a battery and a Bluetooth and an inductive charger.
Now this is interesting to me because in the biblical prophecy it says that the end times mark will either be placed on the right hand or on the forehead. And I've always thought, if you're gonna have this, if you're gonna choose it, then why would you choose to have it on your head? It seems quite intrusive to have it on your head if you could have it on your hand. But based on what Musk is saying, if a disability can be cured in the future by having an implant in the skull, wired into the brain, that device could then also feasibly be used as their digital ID carrier. So people without disabilities would get the mark on their hands presumably, but people with disabilities who are using something like a Neuralink, they'd have an implant in their heads anyway, about an inch thick, about an inch wide I think he said it was. That could be their digital ID carrier. Again, this is all highly speculative at this stage, but it's interesting nonetheless. It's the first time that having the mark on the head is really clicked as to why some people might have that. And Musk actually plans to start testing this on humans this year. So again, this is something else to keep an eye on in the coming years.